Korea recently claimed it had successfully tested a new solid-fuel intermediate-range missile tipped with a hypersonic warhead. Now, South Korea has cast doubt on this claim, adding that the regime appears to be exaggerating its advances in missile technology. We have more the perspectives of the press and pundits on this latest event. Hello and welcome. You're watching Press Perspective for this Monday, January 13th here in Seoul. I'm Min Sunhee. Today we address North Korea's latest display of defiance and its impact on regional security as the U.S. is poised to usher in a second Trump administration. For more on this, I have French correspondent Sebastien Falletti for Figaro joining us live. Sebastien, welcome back.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
Right, I also have Professor Ban Kil Joo, who is now at the Korea National Diplomatic Academy. Professor Ban, it's good to have you on.
Hello, good to be with you.
Right, we will start with you, Sebastien. Precisely a week ago, North Korea claimed it successfully tested a hypersonic intermediate-range ballistic missile. Sebastien, let's begin with the details about this claim, including its broader implications.
Yes, indeed, North Korea test fire, at least it test fired what he called a hypersonic missile on the very first day of the year. It was the first time since April that they tested such a similar missile. And of course, North Korea and the North Korean regime are pushing very much the idea of the notion of hypersonic missile. They have been saying this was a successful launch. And they are emphasizing the dimension that this is a key step in the search of so-called strategic deterrence. So here, clearly, Pyongyang is trying to send a message that is making progress on this very, very significant type of weapon. We know that so-called hypersonic missiles are kind of the new frontier in strategic deterrence around the world, and all the major players around the world, including the US, China, Russia, are trying to go ahead in this field. I mean, why is it so important? I mean, we talk a lot about hypersonic, but the key point here is not so much about the speed, even though this engine can go potentially until five times the speed of sound. But what is key here is more about maneuverability, the ability for what we call a glider or a hypersonic glider to evade anti-missile defense, in particular US anti-missile defense or South Korean anti-missile defense. This is what Pyongyang has in mind. So of course, by doing this launch at the beginning of the year, a very special year, because we know we have a new president coming in the White House, Donald Trump. And on doing this, the very day that the Secretary of State, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is visiting Seoul, North Korea wants to send a signal that it's in the strategic race, and is ready to challenge the big power in this game.
Right. Sebastien, South Korea, for its part, has cast doubt on North Korea's claim about the capability of this latest missile. What has been the assessment of North Korea's alleged advances in missile technology within the foreign media?
As usual, I mean, North Korea always present these kind of launch with fanfare, of course, to the glory also of the regime. But behind the rhetoric, it's very important to check, and we can't always check to what extent this has been a progress. And this time, indeed, Seoul, South Korean military has cast doubt about the significance of the latest test. They are saying that actually, first, in terms of range, this missile has been didn't bring anything new to the picture. It seems that this missile that launch was at a range of 700 kilometers, which is not something extraordinary, bearing in mind that North Korea is showing off this missile test as an ability to strike the entire Pacific and including potentially the US territory. And the second aspect that is casting doubt is about according to the South Korean military, the fact that this test has not shown any progress when it comes to maneuverability, about the agility of this engine compared to the last test in April. At that time, it was a so-called Hwasong 16B, and the question is whether we are facing something totally different, or we are just seeing incremental progress here. So again, a lot of question mark about between what is projected outside from the regime, from the propaganda, and the reality, which is show that there's much more challenges ahead. We know that they are still facing challenges, including when it comes to the re-entry in the atmosphere of those missiles. So there's still a lot of question marks that are raised by experts.
Right then. Professor Ban, how do you explain the timing of this latest launch by North Korea?
Well, unlike short-range missiles, intermediate missiles are weapons enough to target the United States, particularly Guam. In this vein, the launch of a hypersonic missile hints at targeting the United States. In more detail, I would say that Pyongyang has not only intended to show its operational willingness, but also attempted to maximize strategic coercion to the United States when the timing of this launch is taken into consideration. First of all, this launch was made after Pyongyang declared the toughest response strategy toward the United States. So the launch of a new hypersonic missile was intended to show the United States that this strategy has been really implemented on the front line. Through this launch, Kim Jong-un wanted to show that he is more than willing to conduct assertive operations as part of an effort to implement the toughest response strategy toward the United States. Second, this launch was made under a negotiation strategy in a situation where Trump is scheduled to be inaugurated as the US president on January 20th. To be more precise, this launch was aimed at maximizing its negotiating power by designing and implementing a proactive strategy earlier than an expected maximum pressure strategy from the second Trump administration. By showing a new advanced military asset, Kim Jong-un wanted to send a message that there's a lot to be received through possible negotiation with the United States. In short, the provocative mechanism is simple. The more you have, the higher your bargaining power is. Third, the launch of a new hypersonic missile was intended to show that in terms of how to treat it, Pyongyang could differentiate between the Biden administration and the second Trump administration, in the sense that this missile was fired when Secretary Blinken was visiting South Korea. I would say that North Korea wanted to show that it was displeased with the Biden administration by firing a missile when Blinken was visiting. Conversely, North Korea wanted to send a message that the second Trump administration has room to wait and see. To put it another way, Kim Jong-un intended to coerce Trump not to choose an aggressive strategy against North Korea. So all in all, it seems that North Korea believed that the timing of this latest launch was well suited to achieve all these three political and strategic gains.
Right then. So this particular missile was fired last Monday when, as Professor Ban and Sebastien, you mentioned, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken was here in Seoul for talks with his counterparts here, during which he also raised concerns about the sharing of satellite technology between Russia and North Korea. Could you tell us a bit more about that, Sebastien?
Indeed, I was at that press conference last week, and Secretary Blinken talk a lot about this in the context, of course, of the deployment of North Korean soldiers on the Russian front against Ukraine. And of course, there's this, since the alliance, the military alliance sealed last June between Pyongyang and Moscow, there's clearly the suspicion that there's going to be a payback for Pyongyang after the deployment of those troops to the West. And among the main concern that Secretary of Blinken mentioned was, of course, there is already, he said, there's already some military support, direct military support, potentially economic support. But he's also saying there's growing concern that there's also technology transfer in the field of space technology, support to satellite. And this is extremely important and related to what we just discussed before about this missile, because of course we are talking about space technology in the context of strategic deterrence. Satellite surveillance are a key part of the capability for any power today to scrutinize its adversary, to check what is happening and what are the potential threats from your adversary, your enemy. So for North Korea, if they want to keep up their strategic game, they need also this capability. And clearly we've seen in the past year they have been facing a hurdle here. They failed several times to launch those surveillance satellites. And we know that Kim Jong-un visited a space facility in Siberia with Vladimir Putin. So there's clearly a demand from the North Korean side. And last but not least, but one other concern raised by Secretary Blinken was also about nuclear proliferation. This is a big question mark, but he clearly expressed concern that Russia could cross that red line by eventually lifting its opposition to nuclear proliferation, potentially supporting the North Korean nuclear program.
Professor Ban, keeping in mind what Sebastien has just said, do you believe the international community should be concerned about the sharing of such critical information between North Korea and Russia? I mean, what does it mean for security here on the Korean Peninsula?
Obviously, the international community should be worried about sharing satellite technology between Russia and North Korea because, first, it is not simply sharing satellite technology, but a territorial expansion is the intent, which is bad for international security as well. We need to take a look at the dynamics of sharing technology between the two countries. What made Russia willing to share the advanced satellite technology with North Korea? Ultimately, the sharing such technology is aimed at achieving the expansionist objective, which is winning the war with Ukraine and expanding its territory. North Korea deployed its troops to the battlefield to help Russia win this expansionist war. In return, Russia decided to share such technology. This is the exact formula for the technology sharing. Second, the international community should be concerned about such sharing because it is an illegal strategic deal between the two isolationist countries. These countries are under harsh sanctions from the international society because they broke international rules. Meanwhile, these two countries hurried to make such a strategic deal to neutralize those sanctions. In this vein, such sharing is bad for guaranteeing a rules-based international order. Third, such sharing helps not only increase North Korea's nuclear threat, but also it expands it to the world simply beyond the Korean Peninsula. Spy satellites serve as eyes for nuclear weapons. They help North Korea expand its nuclear scope to the world. Moreover, when North Korea has better eyes, which means it is armed with improved reconnaissance ability, its miscalculation is more likely because it could believe that it can offset the military capability of South Korea and the United States. To top it up, such sharing means that Russia could intervene affairs on the Korean Peninsula because it is based on the recently institutionalized Russia-North Korea ties which were made under the Comprehensive Strategic Partnership Treaty. So the sharing of such technologies is not simply tactical but strategic, and it is based on not simply short-term ties but long-term deals.
Right, and aside from the sharing of technology between the two countries, Sebastien, there were some concerning words shared by the US and the UN about North Korea becoming more prepared for military combat. What exactly was shared, and what can you tell us about the North Korean troops currently at the battlefield supporting Russia against Ukraine?
Well, the most latest news we got in the last few days are quite grim, of course, for the North Korean military. According to the South Korea intelligence, there will have been already 300 North Korean killed and potentially 2,700 injured. And we've seen this weekend, for the first time, Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky has released some image of the first prisoner from North Korean prisoner capture on the front line around Kursk. And clearly what you hear from them and the image we have of those soldiers is that they are facing major challenge when it comes to modern warfare, especially combating drones. This is clearly a new development for those soldiers, including for some special forces. And clearly they have been, those soldiers also seem to be not aware where they were sent. They thought they were going on a training according to these testimonies. However, the bigger picture is this is basically a reality check, a baptism of fire for North Korea. So on the short term, it means a lot of casualties, and that's a big challenge for North Korea, including potentially back home, if there is some of these videos circulating online. But the other side, the more brighter spot, is that North Korea's soldiers are gaining real life experience, combat experience, something they have been missing for decades. And this is something that is a high concern in Seoul for the South Korean military, because of course they are worried that in the mid-long term, North Korea could use this new experience and implement it on the peninsula, along the DMZ, to challenge South Korean military. So this is something the Seoul is going to watch very closely, and is for that reason going to try to get closer to Kiev to get as much information as possible.
Right, and against this backdrop, Professor Ban, we are looking ahead to a second Trump administration who has been calling on South Korea to shoulder a greater burden of the cost of having American soldiers stationed here in this part of the world. How do you envision this unfolding with regard to the potential dispute over defense cost sharing between South Korea and the U.S. under a second Trump administration?
Well, the second Trump administration is expected to accelerate this transactional approach in two broad areas, economy and security. In terms of economy, Trump might attempt to renegotiate the FTA free trade agreement with South Korea. When it comes to security, Trump is most likely to demand the renegotiation of the SMA, Special Measures Agreement, with South Korea on defense cost sharing. As you might be well aware, the ROK government has already agreed to the new SMA with the Biden administration. Under this new deal, defense costs will be 1.5 trillion won in 2026, which is up from 1.4 trillion won this year. These two countries also agreed that an annual increase is not based on its own military budget, but on the South Korean Consumer Price Index. The Biden administration says that the South Korea pays enough money. The State Department calls the New Deal a significant accomplishment. However, Trump says that South Korea should pay more because it is a money machine. Since Trump believes himself as the best deal maker, he is eager to achieve the maximized deal with South Korea, which is significantly differentiated from his predecessors. Earlier, Trump said that South Korea should pay $10 billion for American troops in South Korea, which is 9 times more money than the current deal. I don't think Trump really wants to have this huge money, but intends to maximize the stakes in his attempt to raise a level of money that he could have under the negotiation table. South Korea is not the only country in this situation. Trump presses NATO countries to spend 5% of their GDP on their military expenditure, a huge increase from the previous 2%. The second Trump administration seems to push harder on NATO countries than South Korea in an earlier stage. And then when Trump believes that this push turns out to be successful, he is most likely to target South Korea with a stepped up demand. Meanwhile, if initiated as suggested, Seoul would maintain that the currently activated agreed deal should serve as a starting point, not the money that Trump suggested. So yes, a potential dispute is likely to become a real official agenda anytime soon.
Right, I see. Sebastien, staying with security, top diplomats of Seoul and Tokyo met here in the capital city on this Monday afternoon. What was discussed and what makes this latest interaction between Seoul and Tokyo so important?
Yes, the meeting between the foreign ministers just finished a couple of minutes ago. And of course, that meeting was extremely important because it was the first meeting at that level since the imposition of martial law, since the beginning of the domestic political crisis in South Korea. So the visit of the Japanese foreign minister Takeshi Iwaya was a signal on the footstep of Antony Blinken. It was a way for two key allies of South Korea to reaffirm their support to Seoul in this difficult time. So the wording we have seen from this afternoon meeting is on the surface looks like very much support for the government currently in Seoul through this crisis. But of course, behind the scene, there's a lot of question mark, because we know we are still in a very volatile situation in South Korea. We don't know where this crisis is going to end. And of course, I mean, President Yoon was a staunch supporter of this trilateral cooperation with Tokyo, with Washington, and now the question is out of the picture, and who's going to come next? Is it the opposition? We know the opposition is more reluctant to close a tie with Japan, especially, but also with the US. So there is all this question mark about where is South Korea going this year, and whether we're going to have to prepare for a shift. So I think at this moment, these two administrations are trying to stabilize and try to keep as much as has been achieved over the last 2 years to keep the floor on this relationship. I mean, to maintain this cooperation, but they know that there are uncertainty on the horizon, and everybody's going to be watching what's happened in Seoul in the coming weeks in this domestic crisis.
Right, for sure. And for now, the two countries have reaffirmed their commitment to amicable bilateral ties. All right, Sebastien, I'm afraid that's all the time we have. Thank you so much for your thoughts. Professor Ban, as always, thank you very much for your invaluable insights.
Thanks for having me.
Right, well, that is all the time we have for this edition of Press Perspective. Thank you for watching.